Order, order. I call Secretary Gavin Williamson to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. With permission, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement regarding the full opening of our schools and colleges from this week. But before I do, I'd like to update the House on the current position regarding exam results for this year's GCSE and A-level students. As the House will be fully aware, exams had to be cancelled this year because of a COVID-19 outbreak. Students have now received results for GCSE, AS and A-levels, as well as vocational and technical qualifications that will allow them to progress to the next stage of their lives. The independent regulator, Ofqual, had put in place a system for arriving at grades that was believed to be fair and robust. It became clear, however, that there were far too many inconsistent and unfair outcomes for A and AS level students, and that it was not reasonable to expect these to be dealt with even through a boosted and enhanced appeals process. Instead, students have been awarded the grades which schools and colleges estimated they would most likely to have achieved, or their calculated grades if they were higher. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this situation has, I know, caused a great deal of stress and uncertainty, and I'm deeply sorry that those who have borne the brunt of it have been students themselves. I can only apologise to them again for this. We took immediate action to provide certainty as soon as it was clear that if we didn't, too many students would have received grades that didn't reflect their hard work and their ability. For vocational and technical qualifications, the situation was different because most were not subject to standardisation like GCSE and A-level grades. However, awarding organisations that did use a similar model have also reviewed their results. This has been done to ensure that each student has been treated as fairly as possible. We recognise, however, that some students may still be unhappy with their summer grade, and for some there was not enough evidence for any grade to be awarded at all, such as those who are home-educated students. To support these students, we are running an extra exam series in all subjects at GCSE, A and AS levels in the autumn. Additional opportunities will also be provided for some other vocational and technical qualifications which received calculated grades. We've also been working with further and higher education sectors to manage applications for this year's places. To ensure students can progress to higher education, we intend to remove temporary student number controls which have been introduced for the coming academic year. We set up the Higher Education Task Force, and we are working closely with the sector to create additional capacity and encourage them to be as flexible as possible. Providers have agreed to honour all offers to students who meet the conditions of their offer wherever this is possible. In the event that a course is full, universities will give students a choice of suitable alternative courses if they are happy to take it, or a deferred place if they would prefer to wait an additional year. This year, many more students have been successful in meeting the required grades to study medicine and dentistry, and the government has removed the caps on student numbers in place on both of these subjects. The Ofqual board has agreed temporary arrangements with Ofsted to support the ongoing work on this summer's GCSEs, A and AS levels, and vocational qualifications, including appeals and autumn exams, and preparations for next year's exam season. We are determined that exams and assessments will go ahead next year, and we're working with the sector to ensure that this is done as smoothly as possible. The former Chief Regulator, Sally Collier, has decided that the next stage of the awarding process would be better overseen by new leadership. As a result, the Ofqual board has asked Dame Glenys Stacey to act as acting Chief Regulator until December 2020. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Sally Collier for the commitment she has shown over the past 4 years and wish her well. While none of this disruption is what we wanted for our students, I believe that they now have the certainty and reassurance they deserve and will be able to embark on the next exciting phase of their lives. I hope the whole House will join me in wishing all of them the very best for their future. Mr Speaker, I'd now like to turn to the full opening of our nation's schools and colleges. Welcoming pupils back will be a massive milestone for schools across the country. On the 2nd of July, we published detailed plans for nurseries, schools, special schools and colleges that set out what was required to deliver this full return as safely as possible for all of our children. The guidance has been developed with medical and scientific experts and Public Health England and follows regular engagement with the education sector. The recent letter from all 4 UK Chief Medical Officers, which emphasised the low risk of long-term harm from COVID-19 due solely from attending school in comparison to the high risk of long-term harm from not attending school, particularly for more vulnerable children and young people, has, I hope, given parents extra assurance that with the protective measures in place, our pupils are returning to a safe environment and an environment they will gain so much from. As they return, Mr Deputy Speaker, pupils will be kept in consistent groups and older children will be encouraged to distance wherever possible. At a minimum, this will mean keeping whole year groups in schools and colleges separate. This is in addition to the other protective measures such as an enhanced cleaning and hand washing. We've also advised that pupils in secondary schools should wear face coverings in communal areas if there is a local lockdown in place, unless they are exempt. Strict hygiene protocols are in place and PPE is being distributed to every school to bolster their supplies for use in the unlikely event that a pupil develops COVID symptoms on the premises. A small number of home test kits are also being distributed for anyone who develops symptoms and who would not otherwise have access to testing themselves. All schools will also have access to direct support and advice from local health protection teams to deal with any cases that may occur. Together with colleagues from the Department for Transport, we've announced an additional £40 million in funding for local transport authorities to ease pressure on public transport. We've also published guidance for local authorities to manage capacity and reduce the risk of infection on school transport. We have urged all students and staff to walk or cycle to school or college if this is a suitable alternative for themselves. I know that these past few months have been some of the most challenging that schools, parents, and most of all children have faced. I'd like to take this opportunity to applaud all of our dedicated education staff for the incredible efforts that they have made to keep children learning at this difficult time. Mr Speaker, I am confident that we have the necessary preparations in hand to ensure a successful return for all of our pupils, and I commend the statement to the House. Thank you.
Kate Green.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement this afternoon. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm afraid I must complain that I did not receive advance sight of it until 4:36 p.m. You will know that the Ministerial Code required that I should have had it much, much sooner. I'm welcoming the Secretary of State back to his place after a summer of chaos, incompetence and confusion that has caused enormous stress to children, young people, their families and their teachers. Ministers must now learn from their mistakes and ensure that keeping schools open and pupils learning is a national priority. Labour is absolutely clear. We want children back in school and we want them to stay there. I'll always work constructively with the Secretary of State to achieve that, and I hope he will hear my questions this afternoon in that constructive spirit. Because while I'm delighted that the vast majority of schools will reopen fully in the next few days, there remain many issues of concern. Let me start with the ongoing situation regarding this summer's exam results. After days of confusion following A-level results day, the Secretary of State finally heeded calls from young people and from the Labour Party and accepted the centre assessed grades, the CAGs. And while that was the right thing to do, it leaves many of the problems created by his previous flawed standardisation model unresolved. The Secretary of State should have known of the risks. It's been reported that a former senior official of the department raised serious concerns. So can he tell the House when he first knew of the potential problems with his approach and what he did about them? What advice was he given specifically about BTEC students who faced more uncertainty and delay? Can he now assure us that all BTEC students have received their results? He alluded to external candidates who don't have a CAG and they remain in a difficult situation. I don't think they will find the offer of resits sufficiently reassuring, but perhaps the Secretary of State can tell us what support they will receive as they undertake those exams. And there are also significant consequences for higher education, as the Secretary of State rightly noted. Can he tell the House how many young people who missed their first choice university because of his now discredited approach to awarding grades have not been granted those places? What assessment has he made of the impact on universities that will lose students because they can now take up their original choice? What discussions has he had with the Treasury about providing those institutions with additional financial support? Mr. Deputy Speaker, turning now to the reopening of schools, we're all pleased to see children return to class. School is the best place for them to be, not only for their learning, but for their emotional and social well-being. And I pay tribute to the school staff who've worked through the holidays to welcome them back safely. The test now for the Secretary of State is that pupils continue to receive a full education throughout the year and catch up on the learning they've lost. So when will pupils begin to receive support through both the catch-up premium and the National Tutoring Fund? And why are the early years and post-16 providers ineligible for the catch-up premium? Why is the funding available for just a single year when the impact of any further disruption to education is so significant? Can he guarantee that every child will have full access to learning in the event of a local lockdown? Parents' top priority as schools return is the well-being of their children. What plans does the Secretary of State have to provide additional pastoral support? What extra support will be available for children with special educational needs and disabilities? Parents will not be able to return to work without childcare and wraparound care. What plans does he have in place to ensure every parent can access the care they need? And can he tell us a little more about how he will ensure all children travel safely to school, including respecting social distancing on public transport? And finally, what additional financial support, if any, will schools receive to cover any additional specific COVID-related costs this term? Turning to the year ahead, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was glad to read this morning that the Secretary of State has apparently once again listened to Labour and is going to delay exams in summer 2021. Pupils entering Year 11 and Year 13 have already experienced significant disruption to their learning, and the assessment process must recognise that. But schools, colleges and universities need time to plan. So can he say what discussions he's having with the sector and with UCAS to ensure workable arrangements are in place? And can he guarantee that a contingency plan will be put in place this month in case exams are disrupted again? Mr. Deputy Speaker, children and their families should have been the government's top priority. But for weeks, their interests have taken a backseat while the Secretary of State U-turned on everything from CAGs to face masks and left officials to take the blame. He must now take responsibility for ensuring that a summer of incompetence does not descend further into an autumn of disaster and dismay. I implore him to listen to the concerns of parents, of teachers and of the Labour Party. He must now make the education of our children and young people a national and his personal priority.
Secretary of State.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy